But first on the programme, we're going to talk to a lady who is a legend. She's been around as long as I can remember. She's done more than 60 films. She's won awards. She's been on Broadway. And she joins us today to talk about her new book, Saging While Staging. What a pleasure to talk to Shirley Maclaine. How are you?
Very well, Alex. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. And all the better for seeing and talking to you, because I tell you what's really marvellous about you, reading your biog, is seeing how multi-skilled you are. And there aren't many people around today who do different things. They really focus on one thing and they do it as long as they can, and then they seem to disappear. Was it your parents? Because seeing how diverse they were, that seems to be your major influence.
I think the fact that they were unfulfilled at their talents was an inspiration for me, because you like to fulfill your parents in any way you can, don't we? I mean, we all feel that the parents should be happy. That's our concern. But I honestly feel, getting to my metaphysical leanings, that I decided to come into a talented family. I decided to use and amplify my talents so that once I became successful, I could investigate the metaphysical spiritual realm, and then people would listen to me. That is basically a nutshell of what I think happened to me.
It was very interesting visiting your website and seeing the things that you're interested in now, the spiritual life, and you talk about the people that are here with us. There could be aliens. There's all kinds of fascinating things on your website that I read, and certainly in this new book as well. Were you always interested in things beyond the obvious?
Yeah, I see. My dad had a doctorate in psychology and philosophy from Johns Hopkins. So my dad always had these questions about realities that we don't see or are not aware of. My mother was Canadian and very involved with the, let's say, the reality that we don't see about nature. So I had a double whammy going there. And there was never a curtailment of my questions or my curiosity during my lifetime. I remember being a mystic. I didn't know what that meant, but being interested in these mystical things at a very early age, 9, 10, like that. I was asking for telescopes at the age of 9, and was never very attracted to organized religion, but very attracted to the spirituality of the soul. And traveled so much, starting when I was 19. Of course, went to India, and anybody who's spent time in India understands you have to start looking at that sort of thing. But also traipsing around the Orient as long as I did made me appreciate other cultures other than what both the English and the Americans have to offer. However, I have to say that England, was the birthplace of the British Society for Psychical Research, and that was before anyone else really got into it from a scientific, spiritual point of view. And then speaking and knowing Dr. Stephen Hawking. Hawking is a buddy of mine, and only because we had the same publisher at Bantam. Otherwise, what would he be doing with me or me with him? But I visited him at Cambridge, and we've had long conversations about things such as God and what is real. So that is a nutshell.
I've been looking at your career and your CV and seeing how your career has progressed. Is there luck involved, or is it down to perseverance and talent? Because you seem one of the most determined people I've ever read about. When I look at the things you've done and how you've done it, it's your sheer drive that seems to have got you there and makes you still sat here today.
I'm looking at that, Alex, because I have been too much of an overachiever, I think. My drive and persistence, I think, have motivated me too much. And one of the reasons I've written this book is to explain how aging sort of demands that you sit back and look at things, really involve yourself, not with your determination to accomplish whatever it is, but to look at the trees, at the worms, at the insects, at the flowers, at the dogs. I have now 12 dogs at my ranch in Santa Fe, and I learn an awful lot from those animals and from the horses and from the different rhythms of nature, which I ignored when I was young and so ambitious and so overachieving. When I did the Santiago de Compostela pilgrimage, when I walked across Spain 9 or 10 years ago, I was, 65 or whatever. And in doing that, it made me understand basically how overachieving I really am. But I'm looking at the fact, I look back on my past now and I see I was so involved with what I was doing at the time that I think I missed the big subjects of what the culture was doing, what it meant to be alive at the time, what were the larger perspectives and flows and ebbs of reality than just me. And that's one of the reasons I wrote this book, because I've realized that now. That's what saging while aging means.
I'll tell you why I'm here today, having read this book and seen you on programs like Larry King recently, is I want you to help me. What is the key to life?
Oh, what? What I'm attempting to analyze is what lies beneath what we think of as reality.
But that surely leads to a better life and a more fulfilled life. That's what I mean, by looking at those things.
Well, that's got nothing to do with success.
I think it's all connected. If you spend your life looking at the vacuous, often you end up unfulfilled. By looking deeper.
What's the vacuous?
Well, for example, if you look at people like Lindsay Lohan or the Paris Hiltons, who seem to just go out and look beautiful all the time, I wonder where they'll be at your age.
Okay, but I'm not sure that's what's troubling them. I think they're having an adventure with the addiction to fame. That's a rather deep subject. Everybody wants to be friggin' famous. Why? I go through life wishing to be left more and more alone. I've never been interested in fame. I've been interested in creative expression, yes. But I'm not... I have no problem, nor do I want to change the fact that nobody knows I'm in town, if that's the case. I think they're serving as teachers for the rest of us in relation to our opinion about fame, really. So I wouldn't call it vacuous.
What is the most misunderstood problem with society today? What are we missing the most as a generation, as a people?
Yeah, very good question, as I chew on my cookie here. I think human beings in every culture have a problem with authority. I think they resent the fact that they have made themselves subservient to authority. At the same time, they don't really know what to do with the freedom. So that creates an inordinate devotion to organized religion, which means then they'll let God, in their opinion, make the decision. Hence, fundamentalist Christianity, fundamentalist Islam, which I think we really have the right to be frightened of the conflict about. That bothers me a lot, more than anything else. And we've made this ourselves because we haven't taken responsibility for our own lives. We leave it up to some authority figure that tells us what to do. That is, I think, our big problem. I mean, I've been talking about this now for years. I did a whole symposium at the National Press Club in Washington years ago. I had to fill in for the Dalai Lama, and I remember I brought this up, and suddenly the press from all over the world got very wide-eyed. My God, maybe what she's talking about has some validity here. And let's look at where we are. I said, we're going to come to the point where we're fighting each other, maybe even with nuclear weapons, over God. So what I'm doing when I write my books is talking about the real spirituality and not so much about organized religion.
So then the next logical question is, in your research and in your opinion, do you think we'd be better without religion?
Not necessarily. Because religion has served as a guiding light for many, many people. What I'm saying is, Jesus said this, the kingdom of heaven lies within. You will do as I have done and greater. He was saying, don't go outside for your divinity. Your divinity is within. Now, it's interesting that one of the problems that we could possibly have with the knowledge and acknowledgement of space visitors is, what does that do to our religious beliefs? This is one of the reasons that the cover-up has been so successful, because the people, and it's usually military in every country, the people who decide to keep it covered up are afraid about what it does to religion. But let me tell you, the Chinese released all their files, the Russians released all their files, but see, they're not particularly religious cultures. The Brazilians are in the midst of determining to, and when I was in Argentina, I talked to President Menem about this, and he had his military on it all the time. There is no question that these crafts exist, in my opinion. It's not just an opinion, though. It's real in my research. There's no question they exist. Okay, if that's true, what does that do to religion? And I'm saying that God to them, in the people that I've had contacts with who've been aboard the crafts and also who have been patients of John Mack, the great American psychiatrist at Harvard, the visitors, the watchers, as they call it, the star beings, they don't like alien. They don't like that. Don't blame them. They say that God exists for them too. They are children of God just as we are. I'm just saying, let's look at the reality of all of this and begin to fit it into our constructs of a grander reality than the one we're limited by.
Why then do the governments want to keep this from us? What's in their interest to do that? Would we really care?
You know, that's interesting, because 70% of the American public, this is the latest poll, believe that they are here. Now, I think there's a difference between believing the reality that they're here and really specifically understanding what you do with that reality. Because no one in authoritarian circles has said, boom, they're here. Why they're keeping it, what they tell me is they are afraid of the religious implications. But you know, the Catholic Church has reams and reams of documentation on this reality of star beings. The president has no need to know. You're just the president. You know, the people who are really in charge are basically military intelligence, and we've seen a lot of that in our country in the last couple of years because of Bush and how that intelligence operation has been manipulated. But basically, they don't know why they're afraid. It's just such a monumental, huge cover-up that they would like to get rid of. I mean, they would like it. It's a democracy we live in this country and in America, and the idea of exposing it as the truth, and they have so much info on this subject, is very daunting to them. They don't know how the public would react. I understand them.
To wrap this up then, they're here where?
Well, they're in the sky all over the place. You see them. I mean, how many sightings have you seen reported here and in the States? And they're all over the world. What do you mean, where? Now, whether they are infiltrating our subway system, I don't know. There are people I've talked to who claim that they are. I don't have proof that they are. And again, they are waiting to see our reaction about them, too.
What's your opinion on the likelihood of me being one, or you being one, or him being one?
Yeah, I might be one and not even know it. Maybe that's why I'm so interested.
And very finally, are the governments ever going to announce this? Bush certainly won't because of his religious beliefs. Could the next president possibly say enough with all this cover-up that you allege and just say, right, here's the truth, this is what's going on?
Well, that's basically what Carter wanted to do. And when the flap happened in 1952 in Washington, I happened to be living there because I lived across the river in Arlington. I was 18 years old, July 19th, 1952, big flap of UFOs over the Capitol and over the White House. And nobody would really answer what it was. And finally Truman, who was president at the time, ordered Colonel Sanford from the Pentagon to get on and say what he said, which was, and I still have the kinescope, they are not ours and they are not Russian. Remember, it was during the Cold War. We don't know what they are. Now, that's not admitting they're from outer space, but it is basically leaving it quite open. And that's when they ordered Project Blue Book and some of these things to be investigated. But it'll come time soon when this truth will have to be exposed, and then we deal with it however we deal with it.
Now, you've done something like 61 films in your career. You've worked with everyone from Jennifer Aniston to Dolly Parton. I'm fascinated, though, by your work with the Rat Pack and Sinatra. What were those days like? And was Sinatra a nice man?
Oh, what a question. I loved Frank. He was an eccentric. He could be very cruel, particularly to women. He lost his temper often. Some would say had the right to. It's too simple a question, is he a nice man? He was a friggin' genius when it came to music and I think, frankly, acting. Didn't like to rehearse, because if he rehearsed and did it and it fell on its butt, somebody would say, well, he just didn't know how. Whereas if by not rehearsing, they would say, well, he didn't have enough rehearsal, he would have been good, that sort of thing. I found him endlessly deep. We talked about reincarnation. He believed in it. He had, let's say he believed in questioning that it might really be true. Don't forget, he went to the Pope near the end of his life and wanted to be whatever that is you get to be. He told me many times about how he would hear music and chords and different aspects of the vibration of music since he was very, very young. He was open to these metaphysical questions, never ridiculed this at all when he saw that I was into these sorts of things. Dean was all about humor. Dean was very ashamed of not having had an education. So Dean did not like to socialize around people who were tremendously educated, really had an inferiority complex about that. Joey Bishop was the man who put Dean and Frank away with his humor, just eloquently cynical. And Sammy Davis was the talented one. But to have to hang out with those guys and their talent and their sense of reckless fun, I don't think that will ever happen again, because we live now in a world of fear. And they taught me so much about not constricting one's truth. Because they would say the truth right there on the stage. And that's why I think people are still fascinated. They know that, and they knew it then. And they had, of course, I grew up around, I had gangsters. They were all around. And they had their truth, too, their way of doing things, which, of course, you never crossed. I think the reason they were okay with me was I was not afraid of them. I didn't see any reason to be afraid. Now, again, you could say that's my naivete, because God knows I knew what they were capable of. But I don't know, the guys with the pinky rings would always show up in my Vegas shows proud that I was not afraid of them. I don't know.
How do you cope with the megalomania of being an international movie star? I look at someone like Tom Cruise, and I do have sympathy with him, because I think he can't go anywhere. Everybody's now a journalist with cameras on their phones. They can zap you either in a picture or video, and that's then sold to these websites that then get sold to the TV. You're not safe really anywhere unless you're in your home or your hotel room, as we are today. How did you deal with the fame? Was it a problem then, or did they just leave you alone?
They have always basically left me alone. Why? I don't know. I think it's because my life is an open book anyway. What secret will they uncover? I'm not a fashion model, so it's not like, oh, look, what she's wearing today is a piece of nothing. I don't have that problem and never have, although when I was younger, they weren't as prolific as they are now. I mean, now they've got ways of hiding under your bed, for God's sake. Never found it then. But, even though I'm still around and doing things, probably they don't care what I do. That's probably more it. But they didn't, even in the days when I was really hot and young and all that, they were cooler about it then. I really feel for these kids who are trying to deal with this constant scrutiny and flashbulbs and stuff. It's just, and for their children, oh my God. That would drive me nuts.
Can I ask you some silly but really fascinating questions, like, what are you most proud of? What film were you most proud of? What stage show were you most proud of?
God, what am I most proud of has nothing to do with films. I'm proud of my stable way of thinking. Interesting, isn't it, when some people call me wacky? I don't think so. I think I have a very stable kind of understanding the bigger picture. Film most proud of, probably Terms of Endearment. It was very difficult to make, and we got through it. Stage most proud of, the Palladium in London. I'm most proud of that. I found my stage legs here, and with the English audience, I think they enjoyed my bawdiness. Okay, that would be, Palladium London.
As a performer, can film ever compare with the stage? It's totally different, isn't it?
Yeah. Nothing can compare with the stage. I mean, there's an example of karma right there. What you put out, you get back. I just loved that feeling. And what I also loved was the silence that you induce in the audience. So when the glasses are chinkling with ice in Las Vegas, you know you're doing something wrong. There's a lot of coughing and spitting going on in the audience, let's say in a legitimate theater. No, you're doing something wrong. But I think they're all waiting for authenticity from the performer. Is that person really being themselves? Are they totally committed to the part they're playing and so forth? But there's nothing like it. Also, when you do stage work, you have to be physically, spiritually, mentally healthy. You cannot get drunk at night and expect to do it well the next day. You can't run in a rainstorm for a cab in a city street, or you might slip and fall. Then what? You can't be reckless with how you treat yourself on the stage. You have to have all of those human attributes and requirements going and stabilized. Film, it doesn't matter. You come in, you've been drunk all night, as I've watched some of my buddies be. I never had the freedom to let myself get drunk and stuff like that and then work the next day. You always come back and do it again. You know that you can. You know that the crew will understand. Not true with a real, live, authentic audience. They don't understand. They want you to be perfect.
This is a really impossible question, but who's impressed you the most of all the people you've worked with?
That I've worked with? Oh, golly, everybody for a different reason. The people who are free to invent in every take are the ones who've impressed me. Jack Nicholson, brilliant at that. Jack Lemmon, no. Jack Lemmon was very studied, knew exactly what he was doing, and brilliant at it, a real pro. But I sort of, for my taste, I like that Frank never rehearsed, as I mentioned before. The ones who are Meryl Streep, absolutely brilliant, and Nicole, by the way, in the same category. Those people have the freedom, or maybe it's the psychological need to be somebody else, and they completely allow themselves to be that mercurial person. But they're the ones that impress me the most.
Can you have genuine connection with somebody on film or even on stage if you don't like them as a person? Is that possible to create that magic without it being there?
I did it with Deborah Winger. I couldn't stand her. And nor did she like me. And we there, mother and daughter, it created magic. I think that was the method in Jim Brooks's Madness, too. I think he knew that if he put us together, that it wouldn't gel really. And that was the tension he got on the screen.
Very finally, talk to us about your current project with Richard Attenborough. Certainly a legend, a guy who has got an amazing back catalogue like yourself. What was it like working with him, and are you proud of the new film?
Very proud of it. Dickie, as he's often said, you can't be a good director if you haven't been an actor. We've been friends for 50 years. We did a picture together 50 years ago or whenever that was. He is... He gave me the freedom to do nothing on Closing the Ring. He knew exactly what he wanted as I portrayed this woman who was afraid to feel grief. And he would walk in the middle of a scene and say, no, don't let me see that emotion. I don't want to see it. And I would stop it. He has a nose like a bloodhound about expressing emotion. I have a big piece in my book there about working with him and what it was like to be around him personally.
I enjoyed your dinner table stories.
That's right. He has a way of almost a royal way of demanding things to be perfect in something very important to all of us. What do we do when we eat? I mean, look at what we're doing in this culture, basically, is wolfing it down and then acting like wolves. I mean, what do we expect? Dickie is infinitely cultured and demands of himself a very kind of, the only word is ritualistic approach to how he orders wine, how he orders the meal, how many courses he has, how he undoes his napkin, how he finds his position to sit at the table. I just found it fascinating because I had dinner with him every night, he and Sheila, and I watched this. He's also a diabetic, you might not know, and he loves sugar, of course. So I found a place in Santa Fe that makes sugar-free chocolate, and I just should have brought some, and I forgot it. I had it all arranged, and I forgot it. I was afraid it would melt on the plane anyway.
Thank you so much for talking to me today. My final question is this. How do you view your career now? When you look at your early you, do you see that as you now, or is that just some other Shirley MacLaine that happens to be on the telly?
Yeah, I find that sometimes I can't remember how I could have been like that. You have that sensibility, but that goes with memory and aging anyway. So then you adjust to the fact that what you're doing today is much more important than what you can't remember about yesterday.
What's your greatest moment ever?
Oh, Alan. Oh, my God. The greatest memory. I can't say. I don't even want to.
All right. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much for talking to me today. Shirley MacLaine's new book, Saging While Aging, is in your stores now. It is fascinating. It is enlightening. It is certainly different. And thank God for you being you. There aren't many people who say what they think anymore. They're so frightened of people saying, I don't agree with you. And you certainly don't have that fear whatsoever, do you? Don't have that fear, but I don't care if they agree with me or not. Maybe someone said to me once, the secret of life. Didn't you ask me that in the beginning of this interview? I would have to say loving without caring. Interesting. Shirley MacLaine, thank you for talking to me. Thank you.